Hello and welcome back. There's a map in One Piece and there's a stretch of it nobody's finished. Not because the characters haven't got round to it, because the bloke drawing it hasn't finished either. He's been at it since 1997 and he's still going. So tonight we're doing the Iceberg. 12 layers. The top is stuff you'd know from the first episode. A straw hat, a treasure, a lad who wants to be king of something. The bottom is stuff you'd only know if you were arguing about it on a forum in 2006 and losing. Here's the thing I'll say up front though. It doesn't get scarier as we go down. I know that's the whole gimmick with these. Deeper means darker. Deeper means cursed. Deeper means you'll never sleep again. Which is a strange promise for a sleep video, so I'm not making it. It just gets quieter down there. More specific. None of the layers need each other, so drop off whenever. You won't miss anything. Subscribe if you fancy. Right, let's go. Let's start at the top with the bits everyone knows. A man is standing on a scaffold in a town called Town, about to be executed in front of the largest crowd anyone's ever assembled for anything. He's the most successful pirate in history. The government has finally got him, and they've made a proper show of it. Because the whole point of a public execution is the public. They want everyone watching. They want the message to land. And somebody in the crowd shouts up at him and asks where he put his treasure. Which is, when you think about it, an incredibly rude thing to shout at a man who's about to be killed. But this is a pirate story, so fair enough. And Roger tells him. He says, "You want it? You can have it. Go find it. I left everything in that place." Then they kill him, and the world loses its mind. I want to sit on that sentence for a second because it's doing an enormous amount of work, and it's very easy to skim past it. Roger doesn't give a location. He doesn't give a map, a heading, a name. He gives permission. That's it. That's the whole thing. He tells an ocean full of people who've spent their lives being told what they can't do, that the biggest prize in the world is out there, and it's unclaimed and nobody's stopping you. And the world government, who organised this entire event specifically to end piracy forever, stood there and watched him franchise it. That's my favourite thing about the opening of this series. Honestly, the bad guys don't lose a battle. They lose a press conference. They built the stage, they sold the tickets, they handed the man a microphone, and he used it to start the exact thing they were trying to stop. 24 years later, the seas are still full of people chasing a sentence. So that's the setup. Somewhere out there is the One Piece, whatever it is, wherever it is, and the person who finds it becomes the Pirate King. Which brings us to Luffy, and to a detail about him that I think gets flattened a lot in how people talk about this series. Luffy doesn't want the money. He's said so. Repeatedly, fairly early on in fact, in a way that Oda clearly wanted on the record before anyone got the wrong idea. Somebody asks him what he'd do with the treasure, and he sort of shrugs at it. It's not the point. The title is the point. And his definition of the title is the bit that matters. He says the Pirate King is the person with the most freedom on the sea. That's it. That's his entire definition. Not the strongest, not the richest, not the most feared, the freest. Which means the goal of the series from chapter 1 is not a treasure hunt. It's a lad trying to become the least restricted person alive. And the treasure is just the scoreboard. And here's a fun detail on top of that. He doesn't know what the One Piece is. Nobody does. Luffy has organised his entire existence around a thing he cannot describe. If you stopped him and asked him what he's actually sailing towards, he'd have nothing for you. He's not being coy. He genuinely doesn't know, and it genuinely doesn't bother him. I find that quite funny, and also, at 1 AM, quite moving. I don't know. Now the ocean itself. Because the world's built in a way that's worth talking about, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to appreciate how odd it is. There are 4 blue seas, east, west, north, south, ordinary. Weather behaves. Then there's a mountain range circling the planet called the Red Line, and cutting across it, at right angles, is a strip of ocean called the Grand Line, where all the interesting things happen and where the weather stops working. And I mean that literally. On the Grand Line, a compass doesn't work because each island generates its own magnetic field. So you can't navigate the normal way. You need a log pose which locks onto an island's field, and then you have to sit there and wait for it to slowly reset before it'll point you at the next one. Which means you don't choose where you go. The ocean chooses and you tag along. That is a properly strange design decision for an adventure series when you sit with it. The premise of adventure is usually freedom of movement. Here the sea is on rails, and the whole first stretch of the story is about a crew who cannot go where they like. Then either side of the Grand Line you've got the calm belts, which are bands of ocean with no wind and no current at all, so a sailing ship simply stops. Dead in the water. And the reason nobody's paved over that problem is that the calm belts are where the enormous sea monsters live, because there's no current to bother them. So the two ways in are sail up a mountain or sit motionless in a lake full of things that could eat your boat. I love that the first 100-odd chapters of this series have the weather as the antagonist, not a villain, barometric pressure. And then there's the name. This is my favourite bit of the surface layer, and I'd argue it's the most elegant thing in the entire series, because it's sitting right there in the first 5 minutes, and it took over 500 chapters for anyone to explain why it mattered. The man's name was Gold D. Roger, but that's not what the world called him. The world called him Gold Roger. Everybody did. The Marines, the pirates, the newspapers, the crowd at the execution. The most famous human being on the planet and the entire population had his name slightly wrong the whole time because the government scrubbed the middle initial out of every record they could reach. Think about the effort in that. They couldn't hide him. He was far too big to hide. So instead they went in and removed one letter. One. And the world just accepted the new version because why wouldn't you? It's a letter. That is the whole series in miniature. And I don't think that's me overreading it. The government's method isn't deletion, it's editing. They don't erase the man, they erase the punctuation. And it works so well that even the people hunting his treasure spent 2 decades saying his name wrong without ever noticing there was anything to notice. We'll get properly into what the D is later on, and into why one letter is worth a national conspiracy, and honestly, into how little anyone actually knows about it after all this time. That's several layers down. For now, I just want to leave you with the shape of it. A man says a sentence. The sentence is vague on purpose. The world reorganizes itself around the vagueness for the next 22 years. And the one concrete piece of information in the whole affair, his actual name, got quietly filed off before anyone thought to look. He said he left everything in that place. Everything. Which, if the treasure is gold, is a slightly odd word to choose. You'd say, it's all there. You'd say, take it. Everything is a bigger word than that. And it's been sitting in the first chapter, this whole time doing nothing visible. That's the surface. Everybody knows this part. Right, let's go down a bit. Now let's talk a bit about the fruit. The mechanic is this. Somewhere in the world there are pieces of fruit that look mostly normal, except for a swirly pattern on the skin. You eat one, you get a power, and the sea takes away your ability to swim. Permanently. Not, you get worse at it, you go in the water, your strength drains out of you, and you sink. That's the deal. That's the whole deal. And I want to point out how strange that is for a pirate manga. This is a story that takes place almost entirely on boats. The single most likely accident in the setting is falling off one, and the superpower system is designed so that the strongest people in the world are also the ones who drown fastest. Oda built a world where power and geography are actively at war with each other, and he did it in about chapter 1, and then never softened it. Luffy, 20-something years of story later, still cannot swim. Nobody's fixed it, nobody's going to. There are 3 categories and they're worth knowing because they come up constantly. Paramecia are the odd ones. Your body does something it shouldn't, or you can affect things around you in some specific way. Rubber, slicing things without touching them. Turning people into toys, it's the bin category. If a fruit doesn't fit anywhere else, it's a paramecia. And paramecia is where all the genuinely deranged concepts live. Zoan turn you into an animal or a half animal, and there are mythical zoans that turn you into things that don't exist. And logia let you become an element. Smoke, fire, sand, light, magma. Physical attacks pass through you because there's nothing there to hit. Logia was, for a long stretch, the you cannot beat this person tier. Crocodile was unbeatable. Then Luffy threw water at him. That's the whole solution. Sand plus water equals mud, and now you can punch him. Which is a lovely bit of writing, and it's the pattern the series keeps using. The answer to an impossible power is nearly always embarrassingly simple and slightly stupid. Now here's the thing about those three categories that I think is genuinely worth knowing. They weren't the plan, not from the start anyway. The categories got named and formalised well into the series, once there were enough fruits knocking about to need sorting. Oda drew a bunch of weird powers and then went back and built the filing system around them, which is why the filing system has a bin. You can see the seams if you look, which is fine. Most long stories work like that. The thing that's unusual about One Piece is how often those seams end up load-bearing later. Awakening is a good example. Awakening is when a devil fruit user gets so proficient that the power stops being about them and starts affecting the world. A rubber man whose rubberness leaks into the pavement. That sort of thing. And it's introduced almost in passing. It's a word said in a prison, in a stretch of story that's about something else entirely, and then Oda picks it up and walks off with it and doesn't come back to it properly for well over 100 chapters. So the fandom found the word before the series was ready to explain it. And they sat on it and theorised on it and built entire structures on top of a term that had appeared once in a corridor. This is a recurring habit with this series and this fan base, and I'm going to name it once here and then leave it alone. The readers routinely get to a concept before the text does, because the text drops the concept early and then wanders off for years. Right, the rules. There are two hard rules about devil fruits, and they're both properly important. Rule 1. No two identical fruits exist at the same time. One rubber fruit, one magma fruit. That's it worldwide. Rule 2. When a user dies, the fruit comes back somewhere. And here's a fun detail about how Rule 2 got confirmed, because it's one of the more casual pieces of universe-defining information in the whole series. There's a character called Smiley. It's a long story, and honestly, not important, and Smiley dies. And in the background of the panel, in a bag of shopping, an ordinary apple goes swirly. That's it. That's how we learn that devil fruits reincarnate. Not a prophecy, not an ancient text, a bag of groceries. Put those two rules together though, and you've got something with real weight. A power can never be destroyed, only relocated, which means the world's supply of superpowers is fixed and permanent, and killing someone doesn't remove their ability from existence. It just puts it back in circulation for someone else to find. That's why the government is so obsessive about tracking certain fruits. They're not managing people, they're managing an inventory that refuses to shrink. And speaking of things that break the rules, we should talk about Blackbeard, because Blackbeard has two devil fruits, which is meant to be impossible. It's stated flat out earlier in the series that a body with two fruits in it destroys itself, and then this bloke turns up with darkness and earthquakes and doesn't explode, and the only explanation anyone offers on page is a throwaway line from Marco about him having an unusual body type. That's the whole explanation, unusual body type. Cheers. So obviously the fandom went absolutely feral on this, and I mean that with total affection, because some of the theories are genuinely great. The most famous one is that Blackbeard is three people, three souls in one body, and the evidence people assembled for it is a proper masterclass in tidy reasoning. He's got three skulls on his flag. He carries 3 pistols. The scar he gave Shanks has 3 claw marks. And back on Jaya, Luffy and Zoro refer to him as they rather than he. Every bit of that is real. Every bit of it is in the text. And none of it means anything, as far as anyone can actually demonstrate. The 3 skulls have never been explained. Luffy and Zoro said they because they'd seen a group of blokes and assumed they were together. The scar was probably just a 3-pronged weapon. The other big one is that he's got a parasitic twin in his belly. Which, sure, why not? Unusual body type. And here's the bit I find genuinely interesting. Blackbeard didn't eat the second fruit. He consumed his second devil fruit from the body of a dead man. So the whole "how many can you eat" question might not even be the right question, and everyone's been arguing about the wrong mechanic for over a decade. One last thing on fruit, and this one comes from outside the series entirely. Before One Piece existed, Oda wrote a prototype called Romance Dawn. 2 versions of it, both published the year before the series started. There's a lad called Luffy. He's got a straw hat, he's stretchy, most of the furniture is there, but in the first version, the rubber power doesn't come from a devil fruit. It comes from a gomu tree, a rubber tree, which grows rubber fruit. And that's fascinating because for years and years, one of the most persistent fan theories going was that when a devil fruit user dies, their body becomes a tree and the fruit grows back from it. There's no evidence for it. It's never been seen. It's not in the manga, but it was in the draft in 1996. The fandom, without ever having read it, spent 2 decades reverse engineering an idea Oda had written down and then thrown away. Anyway, what are devil fruits actually? Where do they come from? Why do they exist? Why does the sea hate them? Oda's said in the SBS that Vegapunk knows. That's the answer we've got. A scientist in the story knows. That's where I'm leaving it. Right, picture the first chapter. There's a village bar. There's a 7-year-old boy who is being an absolute menace. There's a crew of pirates who've been drinking there for weeks and who are, by pirate standards, embarrassingly nice. And then the boy gets himself thrown into the sea, and a sea king comes for him, one of those enormous things we mentioned earlier, and it's got him, and it's going to eat him, and the red-haired captain turns up and does nothing. That's the bit. He doesn't draw a weapon, he doesn't have a power. He stands in the water with one arm already gone and he looks at it, and he says something quiet about getting lost, and the monster turns around and leaves. And when I first watched that, I thought it was a vibes thing. A cool guy moment. He's just so hard that the fish respected him. Loads of stories do that. It was 400 odd chapters before anyone explained that we'd actually watched a power being used. That's Haki, and I think it's the single best executed thing in the entire series because it's not a retcon in the way people usually mean. Oda didn't go back and change anything. He just left a thing on the page, unlabeled, for 8 years, and then walked back over and put a name on it. There are 3 types, only 3. Oda's been quite firm about this. Observation. Haki lets you sense things you shouldn't be able to sense. Where someone is, what they're feeling, and if you're good at it, what they're about to do, you get a sort of preview of the next few seconds. It's the 6th sense one. Armament Haki is the practical one. You coat yourself, or your sword, or your fist, in something invisible and hard, and now you can hit things. Crucially, it's how you hit a Logia. Remember that whole "there's nothing there to punch" problem? Armament Haki is the answer. It's the reason the Logia tier stopped being unbeatable. And then there's Conqueror's Haki, and that one's different, and we'll come back to it in a second. Now Skypiea, because this is where the seam shows. And I love the seam. Long before anyone said the word Haki, the crew went up to an island in the sky and met people who could do something called mantra. Mantra let you hear people's voices from far away, sense them coming, dodge things you shouldn't be able to dodge. And it was presented as a local thing, a Sky Island religious practice, set dressing for an arc about a place with different rules. Years later, someone mentions offhandedly that mantra is just what they call observation haki up there. Regional dialect. That's all. And I go back and forth on whether that was always the plan or whether Oda had a good idea and reached backwards for something to attach it to. Honestly, I don't think it matters, and I'll tell you why. It works either way. If it was planned, it's brilliant. If it wasn't, it means he built a power system that could absorb a 400-chapter-old arc without anything creaking. That's not worse. That might be harder. Now, Conqueror's Haki. Conqueror's is the one you cannot learn. You either have it or you don't. Roughly 1 in several million people have it. It can't be trained into you. And what it does is knock people unconscious. Not through force, through will. You want something hard enough, and everyone in the room who isn't as sure of themselves as you falls over. And I have to be honest, there's a slightly uncomfortable idea sitting inside that. Because the story of One Piece is, at its heart, about freedom and about ordinary people telling enormous institutions to get stuffed. And the power system says, some people are simply born kings. Not made, born. You can train forever, and you'll never get it. It's the one thing in this world that effort cannot buy. I don't think Oda's endorsing that. I think it's a shonen convention that got baked in early, and then he spent years complicating it. Because most of the people with Conqueror's Haki in this series are appalling, and quite a lot of the best characters don't have it at all. But it's there, and it's a bit of a lump in the middle of the series' politics, and I don't think it ever fully dissolves. Now, how does an entire cast learn a power that didn't exist for 400 chapters? You skip 2 years. That's what happened. The crew gets comprehensively beaten, they get scattered, and Oda jumps the story forward 2 years so that everyone can go away and come back knowing things. Luffy gets a crash course from Roger's old first mate. Zoro goes and trains with the man who beat him. And the story just resumes with everyone competent, which is an enormously confident piece of structure when you think about it. He needed the whole cast to have a skill they'd never heard of, and rather than teach it to us, he taught it to them off page and let us meet the results. And now for the bit I actually find funniest about all this. For years, genuinely years, a big chunk of the fandom was convinced there were more types of Haki. Elemental Haki, Fire Haki, Ice Haki, and the reasoning was solid enough on its face. Sanji sets his leg on fire. Zoro does a thing where he appears to grow extra arms and heads. Neither of them has a devil fruit, so there must be a fire type, and a, demon type. Oda's answer was that there are 3 types, and that's it. Sanji's leg is on fire because of friction. He spins it very fast and it heats up. That's the explanation. The man is on fire because of physics homework. And Zoro's 9-sword thing was described by Kaku as a mental projection, which explains basically nothing and remains one of the great unexplained oddities of the series, and I'm fine with that. The thing underneath all of this, and this is the pattern I keep coming back to, is that Haki retroactively explained one mystery, mantra, and the fandom went, oh, this is a key, and started trying it in every other lock. Anything unexplained became a Haki type. That's not a stupid instinct, it's just wrong. One more, and it's a small one, and it's genuinely daft. There was a serious argument that Nami has Haki. The reasoning? Luffy is made of rubber. Physical attacks don't hurt him, and yet Nami can hit him, and it visibly hurts, so she must be coating her fists in something. Oda's explanation, when asked, was that she doesn't beat up his body, she beats up his spirit. Which is a joke. It's obviously a joke. It's a gag about how the funniest person in a room can wound you. And people wrote it up as a power scaling data point. I'm not laughing at them. I would have done the same. When you've spent 10 years being rewarded for noticing things, you notice things that aren't there. Anyway, the most important power in the series was introduced as a bloke standing still in the water in the first chapter, saving Luffy, and it took 11 years for anyone to be told what they'd seen. Most of this series is like that actually. right there on the page, with no label on it. Now let's talk about a hole. Not a hole in the world, a hole in the record. There's a stretch of history in one piece, 100 years of it, roughly 8 to 9 centuries back, that nobody knows anything about. Only the poneglyphs survive as documents. No monuments, no songs, nothing. And the interesting word there isn't lost, it's not allowed. Because that century didn't fall out of the record by accident. It was taken out. And the organisation that took it out is still running the planet, which tells you the removal worked. Here's the shape of what we do know, and it isn't much. Around 900 years ago, there was a kingdom. It had technology that the current world can't match. It lost a war against an alliance of 20 other kingdoms. Those 20 kingdoms won, formed a government, moved their royal families up onto a mountain, and that government is the same one running things today. Same institution, 800 years and counting. No gaps, no revolutions, no succession crises. And the losing kingdom's name is the one thing nobody is permitted to say. Now the reason we know any of that is the poneglyphs, and they're worth going through slowly because they're a genuinely lovely piece of design. They're big cubes of stone. Indestructible, and I mean actually indestructible, not very tough. People have thrown everything at them. They're covered in carved script that essentially nobody on the planet can read. And they're scattered across the world, sitting in castles and temples in the middle of nowhere. And most of the people who own one have no idea what it says. They've just got a large black rock in the garden that's been there longer than their country has. There are a few kinds. Most of them are informational, bits of history, bits of context, a running message from whoever carved them. Then there are 4 called road poneglyphs, and those are the important ones, because between them they triangulate a position. You need all 4, any 3 gets you nothing, and the final location they point to is Laugh Tale, the island Roger reached, and the last place anyone's been that matters. And then there's the Rio poneglyph, which is apparently the whole thing, the complete true history in one place, waiting at the end. So the treasure hunt is a reading comprehension exercise. That's the actual structure of this series. To get the prize, you have to be literate in a dead language, and the government has made being literate in that dead language a capital crime. Which, let's sit on that, because it's the bit that genuinely unsettles me. There is a law against studying history, not against overthrowing the government, though obviously there's one of those too, against archaeology. Reading the rocks is illegal. Attempting to read the rocks is illegal. And the punishment isn't a fine or a prison sentence, it's the complete erasure of you and everyone near you. I've thought about this a lot, and I think it's the most chilling piece of world building Oda's ever done. And it's not close. Because a government that needs a law against archaeology is a government that knows exactly what the archaeologists would find. You don't criminalise something harmless. The law is a confession. Which brings us to Ohara. Ohara was an island with a very large tree on it, and a library inside the tree, and a lot of extremely mild academics who spent their lives reading. That's it. That's the threat. A few things get muddled about Ohara, so let's be accurate. It wasn't a kingdom. It was a research island. It wasn't in the Grand Line. It was in West Blue, which is one of the ordinary seas, the boring ones, the ones where nothing happens. And the demons of Ohara thing you'll hear about was never folklore. It wasn't a local legend about monsters in the woods. It was a phrase the world government invented and put in the press, a branding exercise. They needed the public to be relieved when the island stopped existing, so they called the librarians demons first. I spent a while, years back, assuming there were actual demons involved, because it's One Piece and there usually are. There aren't. It's just PR, and what happened to Ohara was a buster call. Now here's a myth worth killing, because it's a fun one. For years people assumed a buster call was some enormous doomsday device, a Death Star. Lasers from orbit, island goes pop. It isn't. A buster call is 5 vice admirals and a fleet of ships, and they sail up and they shell the island until there's nothing on it. That's the entire mechanism. It's paperwork and cannons. Someone signs a form and a navy arrives and does its job thoroughly. And I think it's worse for being ordinary. A super weapon is a thing that happens to you. A buster call is a thing that gets scheduled. The moment that gets me, and I suspect it's the moment that gets most people, is Clover on the phone. Clover is the head of the library. He's an old man in a chair, and at the end, with the ships already there, he gets a line to the government and he tells them what they've worked out. He walks them through it. The kingdom, the war, the shape of what was hidden. And then he starts to say the name, and they shoot him. Mid-sentence, they don't wait for the boats. There's a bloke on the other end of a phone call who hears the first syllable of a word and gives an order immediately, because the name itself is the emergency. That's the most dangerous piece of information in that world. Not a weapon, not a location, a proper noun. And out of all of that, 2 people got off the island. An 8-year-old who could already read the stones, because she'd taught herself, because she was the sort of child who taught herself things. Robin's been carrying it ever since. She is, as far as anyone knows, the only living person who can read the poneglyphs, which means she is simultaneously the key to the entire plot and a walking capital offense. She's had a bounty since she was 8, not for something she did, for something she can do. And I want to flag what Oda's actually pulled off there structurally, because it's clever and it's easy to miss. Every long adventure story needs someone to stand next to the ancient thing and explain it. That's the exposition character. It's usually the safest job in the cast. Oda made the exposition character the most wanted person in the world. The act of explaining is the crime. Every time she does her job, she's confessing. There's one loose end here that's never been tied, and I'll mention it because it's been chewed on for 20 years. There's a giant called Saul, Robin's friend, who was frozen by an admiral during all this. And people have argued forever that he might have survived, and the entire argument rests on the name of the technique. Ice time capsule. Capsule. You'd preserve something in a capsule, wouldn't you? That's it. That's the whole case. A word in a move name. It's not been resolved either way, and I've got no idea, and I quite like that. I've got no idea. Anyway, there's a century that's missing, there are rocks nobody can read, and there's a woman who can read them who's been running for most of her life. Robin's still reading, as far as anyone knows. That's where I'll leave it. 1 letter. That's the whole thing. 1 letter, sat in the middle of a name, doing nothing you can see. Gold D. Roger, Monkey D. Luffy, Portgas D. Ace, Marshall D. Teach. It's not a middle name. Nobody says it out loud like a middle name. It's just there, with a full stop after it, and it has been there since the first chapter. And after nearly 30 years of story, we still don't know what it stands for. I love this. I want to be clear about that up front because I'm about to spend a while listing all the things it isn't, and I don't want that to come across as sneering. The D is my favourite unanswered thing in fiction. Not because I think the answer will be brilliant, mostly because I've made peace with the idea that it might not be. So, what do we actually have? We know the government reacts badly to it. That's the strongest evidence there is. The letter got scrubbed out of the Pirate King's public name, as we said, and there's a moment on Ohara where the mere fact of the D is treated as classified. We know there's a phrase attached to it, the will of D, something that gets inherited, passed along, handed down, not a bloodline exactly, or not only a bloodline, a will, a thing you carry. We know that Rocinante, Law's Corazon, the man in the feathers, says that people who carry the D are God's natural enemy, which is a properly enormous sentence to just drop into a flashback and then die. Enemies of God. Not enemies of the government. God. And we know they smile when they die. That one's the strangest, and it's real, and it's consistent. Roger's smiling on the scaffold. Ace goes out grinning. It's not defiance exactly. It's something calmer than defiance, and Oda has never once had a character explain it. That's the evidence, all of it. 4 things and a letter. Now, the guessing. The most famous theory, and the one I'd bet most people reading this ran into first, is that the D stands for dragon, and there's a lovely reason for that. Back in the early days of the anime, there was an arc that wasn't in the manga at all. Filler. Warship Island. And in it, there's a dragon. And there's a moment where it seemed like Luffy could understand it. And Luffy's dad is called Dragon. And the maths writes itself. Except none of it was Oda. It was written by the anime staff. And a fairly popular blogger at the time took a guess at what it meant. And the guess spread. And because it spread from a big platform, it became something everyone had heard. And everyone had heard it from someone else. And after a couple of years, nobody could remember that the original source was a bloke's hunch about a filler arc. That's my favourite kind of fan myth, honestly. Not a lie. Just a guess that outran its own footnote. The others come thick and fast, so let's just go through them at a wander. The D is half a smiley face, because of the dying smile thing. You know, :D, it's a mouth. That one's genuinely charming and completely unfalsifiable. The D means danger, and people will tell you a 5 elder confirmed it. He didn't quite. What he said, depending on the translation you've got, is closer to D always means danger, meaning the people carrying it are dangerous, which is an observation about a track record, not an etymology. The theory is a translation artifact wearing a hat. The D means Damashi, spirit, soul, which fits the will and inheritance language nicely and has no evidence at all. The D means devil, on the grounds that God's natural enemy is a reasonable job description for a devil, and there's a whole devil fruit thing going on. Also fits, also nothing. The D is the family name of the Lost Kingdom, or a clan inside it. Fits best of all, I'd say, and we know nothing whatsoever about that kingdom's culture. So this one's basically a bet. And then my favourite, the D is half a circle. Look at it. It's a semicircle with a line. And the treasure is called the One Piece. So the theory is that the letter is a shape, and that when you find the treasure, the shape completes itself into a whole. And the name of the series is a jigsaw instruction. That is so tidy. It's so satisfying. It's got everything, visual, thematic, wordplay, the title of the series doing double duty. It's the sort of theory that makes you sit up in bed. And there is nothing behind it, not a single line of text. Someone looked at the letter D and thought about it for a bit. I've decided that's fine. That might be the best possible use of a mystery, actually. Right, 2 dead theories worth doing properly, because they show how this stuff dies. First, the D only passes through the male line. That was a real widely held position for years, and it was based on genuinely reasonable observation. Every D anybody had ever met was a bloke. It held right up until Portcus D. Rouge turned up, and Ace's mother is a D, and the whole idea evaporated overnight, killed by one panel. Clean death, no suffering. Second one's better. Whitebeard. There was a persistent theory that Whitebeard is secretly a D. His name's Edward Newgate. Well, Edward D. Newgate. Move the space. Job done. And people wanted it badly because he's enormous and important, and it felt right. The problem is that there's a flashback where Whitebeard asks Roger what the will of D actually is. He asks. He doesn't know. That is not a question a member of a secret bloodline needs to put to somebody else. And I think that's a useful little lesson about theorising. Actually, the killing blow isn't usually a big reveal. It's a small piece of behaviour that doesn't add up. He asked. That's all it took. Before that, I want to go back to the smiling, because I don't think it gets talked about properly, and it's the only bit of actual evidence that has never been explained away. They smile when they die, and it's not a hard man thing. That's what I want to be clear about. It's not a defiant grin, it's not, "You'll never break me." It's not the sort of thing an action hero does to look cool while bleeding. Roger's smile on the scaffold is relaxed. Ace at the end, in the worst possible circumstances, surrounded by everything going wrong. He's genuinely, warmly pleased. He's thanking people. That's a very odd note to hit, multiple times, deliberately, decades apart. And I've never seen a theory about it that satisfies me, because most of them try to make it a power. It's a Harkey thing. It's a psychological conditioning thing. It's a genetic marker. People reach for a mechanism, because if it's a mechanism, you can solve it. But I don't think it's a mechanism. I think it might just be a temperament. The Will of D might not be a bloodline or a clan or a secret at all. It might be a description of a certain sort of person who keeps turning up, who cannot be reasoned with, who wants what they want and is not frightened of the ending. And if you were an 800-year-old institution built entirely on managing what people believe, that's exactly the kind of person you'd have a file on. Not because they're strong, because they don't care what you say. Anyway, that's a theory. I've just done the thing I've spent this whole section warning you about. Noted. The last one I want to touch is subtler, and it's the one I think about most. Everyone will tell you Luffy inherited Roger's will. It's practically settled fandom furniture, and you can see why. Shanks says he's like Roger. Rayleigh says he's like Roger. They laugh the same. They've got the same hat. They've got the same appalling instinct for walking into the worst possible room. But a lot of characters have actually said it. Many times. It's implication all the way down. Extremely heavy, deliberate, repeated implication. An implication is not confirmation. And this fandom has spent its entire existence living in the gap between those two things, which honestly might be the real answer to what the Will of D is. Not a bloodline, not a clan, a resemblance that keeps happening, that nobody can prove, that the government finds so alarming they've made it illegal to notice. Or it's dragon. I don't know. It's still one letter. Nobody's said. 3 names: Pluton, Poseidon, Uranus, 3 weapons tied to a lost kingdom, capable, we're told, of destroying the world. And what I find genuinely lovely about them is that Oda hands us all 3 in completely different registers. One arrives as a document. One arrives as a person. One arrives as a word and then just sits there for hundreds of chapters, doing nothing, like an unopened letter on a hall table. Let's take Pluton first. Pluton is a warship, an enormous one, apparently capable of wiping an island off the map in a single go. And the blueprints for it exist, and they've been passed down through generations of shipwrights in a place called Water 7. Now, Water 7 is a city built on canals, where people get about by riding yakura bulls through the waterways. It's a working town, and the custody chain for the most dangerous document in the world runs through it like a family recipe. An old master shipwright called Tom had them. Tom passed them on, and they end up with Iceberg, who runs a shipbuilding company, and with Frankie, who at the time of the story is essentially a man in a pair of Speedos who builds boats and bothers people. That's the security arrangement for a planet-ending superweapon. A bloke in a shed, keeping a family promise. And I think that's the most One Piece thing imaginable. Not a vault, not a temple. A trade handed down, with the doomsday plans tucked in among the ordinary paperwork, because someone 100 years ago decided that the safest place for it was with people who'd rather build than burn. There's a small sidebar here that's worth a minute, because it's a perfect little example of how fan theory works. There's a government agent called Corgi who turns up in Water 7 trying to get the Pluton blueprints out of Iceberg. And the thing is, decades earlier, a man called Spandam was doing exactly the same job, leaning on Tom for the same document, and Spandam was running CP5 at the time. So, Corgi is doing CP5's old job, therefore Corgi is CP5, therefore Corgi is probably the leader of CP5. Except Corgi is never described as anything other than a government representative. That's it. That's his whole label. The theory is built entirely on the fact that his task rhymes with an older task. And I want to name that pattern once because we'll bump into it again. This rhymes with that, turning into this is that. It's the engine of about half the theories in this fandom. And it's not a stupid engine, it's how you spot foreshadowing. It's just that Oda writes a world where people sometimes do the same job twice for boring reasons. Right, Poseidon. Poseidon is the good one. Poseidon is, I think, the single best structural joke in the series, and I don't think Oda gets enough credit for it. The setup is that there are 3 weapons capable of destroying the world, and the story has spent 100+ chapters conditioning you to expect an object. Pluton is a ship, so the other 2 are, what, a cannon, a fortress, something with spikes on? Poseidon is a 16-year-old mermaid princess who is frightened of nearly everything and cries at roughly the pace of a garden hose. Shirahoshi cannot fight. She has no interest in fighting. She's about the size of a cathedral, which is a mermaid thing, and she spends her introduction hiding in a tower because she's scared, and she apologizes constantly, and she is one of the softest characters Oda has ever drawn. And she can call the Sea Kings. The Sea Kings being, as we touched on earlier, the enormous things in the calm belts that nobody can fight and everybody avoids. There are creatures out there the size of islands, and this girl can talk to them, and they listen, and if she asked them to, they would come. So the weapon is real. The weapon is exactly as dangerous as advertised. It's just that the trigger is a very kind child who would never, ever pull it. Which, that's the whole thesis of the series, isn't it? Power is not the interesting question. What kind of person is holding it is the interesting question. And Oda made that argument by taking the second Doomsday device and giving it anxiety. And then there's Uranus. Uranus is a name. That's it. For an extremely long stretch, that was genuinely all we had. A word in a list of 3, mentioned and then abandoned. 2 of these things got introduced properly, and the third one sat in a sentence for years like an unlabelled box in a loft, which means, obviously, that Uranus is where the theory pressure went. All of it. Every unexplained thing in the series got proposed as Uranus at some point. If there was an odd machine in the background of a panel, someone had a thread going. It's the empty slot. And empty slots in a story this old don't stay empty in people's heads. They fill up with whatever's nearest. And there's one more thing about Poseidon that I think is the actual masterstroke, which is the delivery. Because we don't find out she's the weapon in a dramatic reveal. There's no lightning. What happens is that a very old, very frightened prophecy gets explained, and it turns out the ancient weapon in question is reborn every few hundred years as a mermaid princess, and this generation's happens to be the one in the tower. So it's not a machine anyone built, it's a thing that keeps happening. Every few centuries, somewhere in the ocean, a child is born who can command creatures the size of countries. And most of the time, nobody ever finds out, because most of the time, she just gets on with her life, which means there have been others, quietly, through history, girls who could have leveled the planet and instead grew up and got old and died without anybody noticing, because nobody asked and they never volunteered. I find that lovely, actually. The most dangerous thing in the world is a recurring accident of birth. And the reason the world's still standing is that the vast majority of people, given an unimaginable amount of power, would rather not. Here's a fun detail on the naming. While we're here, Pluton, Poseidon, Uranus, those aren't from the same pantheon. Pluto's Roman. Poseidon's Greek. Uranus is Greek as well, but he's from a completely different generation of the family. He's a primordial. He predates the gods, everyone knows. So it's a mismatched set. Roman underworld, Greek sea, Greek sky before the sky. And you can go 2 ways with that. Either Oda grabbed 3 god names that sounded good and didn't overthink it, which, fair, that's what most people would do, or the mismatch is the point. An underworld sea-sky is a deliberate three-domain carve-up of the world, and the pantheon inconsistency is just noise. I lean towards the second, mostly because Sky is the one we haven't seen, and this is a series with an entire island up in the clouds that everyone's forgotten about. But I'd also point out that I lean that way because it's tidier, and we've already established that tidiness is exactly the trap. Last thing on this layer, and it's the one I actually think about at night. The scariest weapon in this series isn't any of the three. We've already talked about what the government does when it decides an island shouldn't exist. No super weapon required, no ancient technology, just ships and men doing a job, and someone signing off on it in an office somewhere far away. The Lost Kingdom built 3 world enders and hid them so thoroughly that one of them is still missing. The people who beat that kingdom never needed one. That's the bit. 2 located, 1 still just a word. On we go. There's a room at the top of the world with a chair in it that nobody sits in. That's the image I want to start with, because I think it's the best single image Oda's ever built, and it's built entirely out of furniture. The room is in Mary Juai's, the holy city, which sits on top of the Red Line, that mountain range circling the planet we mentioned earlier. And the room is where the world's monarchs meet every 4 years at a summit called the Reverie. 50-odd kings and queens in one hall, sorting out the planet, and in the middle of that hall is an empty throne. And the meaning of it is explicitly stated, and it's a genuinely beautiful bit of political theatre. The empty throne is a symbol. It means nobody rules the world. It means the 20 founding kingdoms are equals, that no one sits above anyone, that the seat at the top of the world is deliberately vacant, because the whole point is that it stays vacant. That's what it means. That's what everyone in that room has been told since the beginning, and then everyone goes home and the doors close, and someone sits in it. I don't think I've ever recovered from that reveal, honestly. Not because it's shocking. You can see it coming a mile off the moment Oda lingers on an empty chair, because of how insulting it is. The world's most sacred symbol of shared power is somebody's actual furniture. It's a chair. He sits in it. When you've all gone. That's Imu. And what's remarkable about Imu is how little we've been given. A silhouette, a shape in a dark room, seated, surrounded by the 5 elders who, and this is the important bit, bow. The 5 elders bow. Because up to that point, the 5 elders were the ceiling. They were the top. They're among the ones who can order the buster calls, who oversee the admirals, who influence which countries get to keep existing. 5 old men in a room, and they had no boss, and the horror of them was precisely that there was nobody to appeal to above them. And then the door opens, and they all kneel. The ceiling had a ceiling. That's the reveal. It's not here's a stronger villain. It's the thing you thought was the top of the building was the ground floor, and you've been looking at the wrong building. The other thing we get in that scene is a decision, and it's a nasty one. There's a stack of wanted posters, and Imu goes through them, and picks who's a problem. And one of the ones picked is Vivi, which if you know, you know. Vivi is a princess from a desert kingdom who spent an entire arc trying to stop a war without anyone dying. She's about as gentle a character as this series has. She's not powerful. She's not a threat by any measure anyone could write down. And the king of the world looked at her poster and decided she was a problem. And we don't know why, and the not knowing is doing all the work. Now the 5 elders themselves, briefly, because they've been reframed a bit and I don't want to over-explain something we'll otherwise be circling. For most of the series, they're a committee. They stand around a table and they make appalling decisions calmly. And the calm is the whole characterization. They're not raving. They're not gloating. They've just got a world to run. And sometimes running a world means an island stops existing. They discuss it the way you discuss a road closure. More recently, the series has been more direct about what they actually are and how long they've been doing it. And I'm going to leave that fairly loose here, partly because it's still unfolding week to week as of me recording this, and partly because I don't think chasing the newest chapter is what anyone wants at 1 in the morning. The series has started putting Imu on the page directly rather than as a shape in the dark, and I've got feelings about that, which I'll get to. But let's talk about Mary Joyce itself for a second, because there's a detail up there that I genuinely can't stop thinking about. Under the holy city, in a vault, there's a straw hat. It's enormous, preserved, kept in a room Imu visits in a frozen state, treated with a level of care that the world government does not extend to actual people. It's clearly ancient. It's clearly the same shape as the one on Luffy's head. And nobody has explained it. It has just been sitting there. A hat in a fridge under the holiest building on the planet, guarded by the people who erased a century of history. And the way Oda revealed it was to show it to us for about 2 panels and then move on to something else entirely, which is the most infuriating thing he does, and also, obviously, the reason we're all still here. Write the Reverie, and then I'll leave this layer alone. The Reverie is a summit. Every 4 years, all the kings and queens of the member kingdoms come to the holy city and discuss the state of the world and make decisions about it. And the actual decision maker isn't on the guest list. That's the joke. The most powerful being on the planet is not invited to the meeting where the planet gets sorted out. Because inviting him would mean admitting he exists, and the entire legitimacy of the arrangement rests on him not existing. 50 monarchs fly in from all over the world, sit in a room with a chair in it, have a serious conversation about their people, and go home. And the outcome was decided by the bloke whose chair it is. That's the whole system. It's not that democracy's been corrupted, it's that it was scenery from the beginning. And the empty seat isn't a symbol of shared power, it's a bloke's spot. And everyone's been solemnly bowing at it ever since without knowing. We touched earlier on the government criminalising archaeology. Same institution, same instinct, and I'll not go back over it. But it's worth noticing that these are the same people. The ones who banned the reading of the stones are the ones bowing to the chair. Their product isn't order. Their product is the story about order. That's what they make. That's what they sell. And the poneglyphs are a competing product. Here's my honest take, and it might be an unpopular one. I think Imu is better as a silhouette. The version of that character who exists as a shape in a dark room, making decisions we don't understand, on a scale we can't see, is genuinely frightening in a way that very little in shonen manga manages. He's not a fighter, he's a policy. And the moment the series starts putting him on page properly, in the light, having a go at people, some of that goes. It has to. That's what happens when the shape gets a body. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying I get slightly nervous every time the story walks towards him, because you can only answer that question once. The chair's still there anyway. The first time we ever hear the name Joy Boy, it's in an apology. That's it. That's the introduction. There's a poneglyph on Fishman Island, and Robin reads it, and it's a letter. A man from the lost century writing to the mermaid princess of his day, saying sorry. He made a promise. He couldn't keep it. He's apologising in stone and asking her to forgive him and hoping that one day someone else will come along and do the thing he couldn't. And that's the entire character. For years and years, that's all Joy Boy was. Not a warrior, not a king, not a monster. A bloke who let someone down and left a note about it. I think that's such an odd choice, and such a good one. The most mythologized figure in the series is defined entirely by a failure. Everyone else in this world is remembered for what they did. He's remembered for what he didn't manage. Now the fruit, here's the thing that broke the internet. And I mean that fairly literally. For about a week you couldn't move for people arguing about it. Luffy's devil fruit is not called the Gomu Gomu no Mi. It's called the Hito Hito no Mi, Model Nika. It's a mythical Zoan. It turns you into a god. For over 1,000 chapters, the most famous superpower in modern manga was mislabeled on the box. And it wasn't mislabeled by accident. The government did it. Same instinct as the missing letter in Roger's name. They didn't hide the thing. They couldn't hide the thing, so they filed the paperwork wrong and let everyone else do the rest. They called it a rubber fruit, and the entire world, including every scholar and every pirate and every marine, looked at the most wanted object in existence and thought, rubber, naff, next. And that's why it worked. That's why they never found it. The camouflage wasn't a vault, it was a boring label. So there's this government department that has been hunting one specific fruit since before anyone alive was born. Generations of dedicated, well-funded, obsessive searching. And they find it, genuinely, they find it. They've got it in a box on a ship, and they're transporting it. And a pirate crew robs the ship, and the pirate crew are Shanks's lot, and they don't know what it is either. They've nicked a crate. And then it ends up on a table in a bar in a village in the East Blue, which is the middle of nowhere in the middle of nowhere. And a 10-year-old eats it because he was told not to. 800 years of the most powerful institution in the world looking for a thing, and it gets eaten off a plate by a child having a strop. I think about that constantly. I think it might be the funniest thing in the series. Right, who's Nika then? Nika is a folk figure, not a god anyone worships in a temple. A story slaves told each other. The sun god, and the description we get of him is the most important bit. So listen to what the qualities actually are. He's the warrior of liberation. He shows up where people are suffering, and he sets them free, and he does it laughing. He's described as making people laugh. He's fast and he's free, and his whole deal is that watching him makes you feel better. That's the god. Not a god of strength, not a god of justice, a god of comedy. And I want to sit on that because it recontextualizes the entire series, and it does it without changing a single event. One Piece is a story where the hero is an idiot. He's stupid, he's rude, he picks his nose during serious conversations, he falls asleep at critical moments. Very serious people spend a great deal of time being furious that he isn't taking things seriously. And the reveal is that the silliness isn't a flaw the story tolerates, it's the point, it's the mechanism. Freedom, in this world, looks ridiculous from the outside, because seriousness is what the people in charge use to keep everyone in line. A room full of solemn people bowing at a chair, that's what order looks like. A man who laughs at it isn't failing to understand. He's the counter-argument. The sun god is a joke, deliberately. That's the theology. There's a moment I want to mention here, and it's small, and I think it's the best bit of the whole business. At a certain point in the middle of an enormous fight, Zunesha stops. The elephant, the one we'll get to properly later, it stops walking, which it has not done in 800 years, and it says, to nobody, to the air, to itself, that Joy Boy has returned. And it's not a reveal, only Momonosuke hears it. There's a character standing there to receive the information. It's an animal, just offshore from the fight, saying a name it hasn't said for 800 years out loud to Momonosuke. That's how the series announces the biggest thing in its own plot. Not with a speech, with a very old creature noticing something and being pleased. I think about the emotional maths of that. Whatever Zunesha is, it knew him. It knew Joy Boy personally, back when it happened. And it has been walking ever since. And somewhere in all that walking, it presumably stopped expecting anything. And then one afternoon, it feels something and stops dead and says his name. That's not a plot beat, that's a bloke seeing an old friend across a road. And the same beat lands somewhere else too, in a much worse register. Kaido, who is not a sentimental man, who is arguably the least sentimental character in the series, recognises the return of the one who brings the dawn as well. He's the one who says that Luffy will bring the dawn in front of people. And the way he says it isn't triumph and it isn't fear exactly. It's more like a man being told a rumour he half believed as a child has just turned out to be true, and he doesn't know what to do with his face. Which tells you something about how old this story is inside its own world. The monsters remember him. The elephant remembers him. Everyone who's been alive long enough to have heard the name reacts to it. And everyone who hasn't just sees a bloke laughing. Now, the argument. because there is a genuine, long-running, occasionally quite heated disagreement about whether any of this was planned, and I want to do it properly, rather than just picking a side and being smug. Camp 1 says it was seeded from Chapter 1, and the evidence is real. Luffy's design has always been sun-adjacent, the straw hat itself, the way Oda draws him, the laughing, the rubber. Nika's described as being able to fight however he likes, in ways that feel like nonsense, which is a fairly precise description of what Luffy's been doing since the beginning. And Oda has form for this. We've already gone through the man leaving a power on the page unlabelled for 8 years, and then coming back to name it. Camp 2 says it's a late reframe, a very graceful one, but a reframe. The argument being, Oda gave his protagonist a joke power because he was writing a comedy adventure at the time, and 20-odd years later, he needed the joke power to carry the weight of a finale. So he built a theology that made the joke load-bearing. And that's not cheating, that's craft. That's what you do. Both readings have got real evidence, and I don't think either camp is being daft. Here's the one piece of hard information I can actually put on the table, and I want to be careful about what it proves. Oda has said, talking about Romance Dawn, the prototype, the early draft, that even back then, before he'd worked out most of it, he knew one thing. He knew the story would begin on a ship and end on a ship. Now, that's evidence that the man plans long. Genuinely long. Before the series existed, he had the last image. It is not evidence that he planned Nika. It's evidence about a different thing entirely, and I've seen it used as a trump card in this argument more than once. And it isn't one. He knew the shape of the ending. That doesn't mean he knew what was in the middle. My honest position, for what it's worth, I don't care, and not in a dismissive way. I mean, I've genuinely stopped finding the question interesting, because the reveal works either way. If he planned it, it's one of the great long games in fiction. If he didn't, then he wrote himself into a corner and got out of it by inventing a god of laughter, which is a more impressive act of improvisation than most people manage in a career. The drum beat. That's the bit I actually like. When it kicks in, there's a sound in the panels, a rhythm, and every character who's ever been on the receiving end of this world's cruelty hears it and doesn't know why they're happier. I've got no notes on that. That's just good. Here's a flat fact. There was a crew before Rogers that was worse than Rogers. Much worse. They were the biggest thing on the ocean. They terrified everyone. And then they were gone. And the erasure was so complete that not only did the public forget them, the pirates forgot them. People whose entire profession is remembering the last great crew had never heard of them. That's rocks. And the way we find out about them is one of my favourite scenes in the series because it's Garp, and Garp is bad at this. Garp is a Marine. He's an enormous, cheerful, violent old man who punches people through buildings and eats crackers, and is somehow also Luffy's granddad. He is not a man built for secrets, and he sat there being interviewed essentially, and the name comes up, and he does the thing where he goes quiet, and then he explains that there was a crew 40 years back, led by a man called Rocksteeg Sebek, and that the government made sure nobody talks about it. The D, by the way, sat right there in the middle of the name. We'll come to that. Now, the crew roster is where this becomes genuinely funny, and I don't think that's me being irreverent. I think it's meant to be funny. On that ship at the same time were Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, and Shiki, and a few others. If you don't know those names, 3 of them go on to become emperors. 3 of the 4 most powerful pirates alive, decades later, each running their own empire, each of whom would flatten a country if they were in a mood. And when they were younger, they were all members of the same crew. Take a second with that. Big Mom and Kaido, on the same ship, taking orders from the same bloke, sharing a galley, presumably arguing about whose turn it is on the washing up. Neither of those 2 can be in a room with another human being for 4 minutes without it becoming a disaster. And they spent years as colleagues. And the reason the crew fell apart, we're told, was essentially the God Valley incident. Nobody would take orders. It was a crew of people who were each individually going to be the most powerful person alive within 20 years, and every one of them knew it, and none of them was prepared to be anybody's subordinate. It wasn't defeated by ideology. It came apart because of staffing. I genuinely love that. The most dangerous crew in history, and the fatal flaw was that they were all insufferable. Well, it wasn't only that. There was also God Valley. Right, God Valley. This is the bit that properly gets me. God Valley is an island where 40 odd years ago something happened. And what happened is that the Rocks pirates were there, and the Marines were there, Garp specifically, and Roger was there, and Garp and Roger fought together. The greatest Marine of his generation, and the man who'd go on to be the Pirate King, on the same side, on the same day, against the same crew. That's the incident. That's why Garp's called a hero. That's how Rocks ended. And after that day, God Valley isn't on the map. Not abandoned, not in ruins, gone, not in the atlas, not in the records. An island participated in the most significant battle of its century, and then stopped being a place. Now this is where I want to draw a distinction, because it'd be easy to lump this in with the century we talked about earlier, and I think that'd be a mistake. That was ancient history. Stone tablets, dead languages, a kingdom nobody living has met. You can sort of understand a government successfully burying something that old. Time does half the work for you. God Valley was 40 years ago. There are people walking around who were there. Garp's still alive. He's still working. The government didn't erase a myth. They erased a Tuesday. Within living memory, with witnesses, with a Marine hero standing right there being celebrated for it. They took an entire island out of the record, and it stuck. And their method wasn't even, we defeated Rocks. That's the bit that gets me. A normal government would take the win. It's a fantastic win. You beat the worst crew in history, and you've got the Pirate King on your side. You put that on posters. They went with, it never happened instead, which means the win was less valuable to them than the silence. Something about that day was worse for them than losing the credit for it. So the question isn't what Rocks did. The question is what was on the island, which is where the theory pressure goes, obviously. And it goes hard, and I'm not going to walk you through all of it because most of it is people building cathedrals on a paragraph. But there's a reason the fandom is so unhinged about Rocks specifically. And I want to name it because it's a technique, and it's slightly unfair. Oda paused the story to say, and there's a whole other story back there. And then he didn't tell it. That's it. That's the whole bait. He didn't hint, he didn't foreshadow. He explicitly stated that a major saga exists just off the edge of the page, gave us a cast list of characters we already love, and then went back to what he was doing. Of course, everyone lost their minds. He put a door in the wall and then walked past it. Something worth flagging about that crew, while we're here, is Shiki, because Shiki's the odd one out. The others all went on to be emperors, and everybody's heard of them. Shiki went to prison, Impel Down, the big one, and then he broke out, which nobody had ever done, and then he essentially retired to somewhere nobody could find him, and he's got flying knives for legs. That's not a metaphor. He lost his legs and had swords fitted, and he can make things float, so he flies about on his own shins. The reason I mention him is that he's the only member of that crew who's mostly a film character. He carried a whole feature film, and then the main story has essentially never picked him up. So there's a man who was on the most dangerous ship in history, who beat the unbeatable prison, who's still out there somewhere, and the manga's just left him. I'd quite like Oda to remember him. I suspect he won't. There's a lot of ocean and not many chapters left. And then there's the name itself, which people don't talk about enough. Rocks. Rocks de Xebec. A Xebec is a real thing. It's a type of Mediterranean sailing ship. 3 masts used by corsairs, actual historical pirates. So his surname is a boat, which is a nice bit of naming. But rocks. Rocks is what you call the thing that sinks ships. That's what rocks are at sea. They're the hazard. They're the thing on the charts with the little cross next to it that means don't go here. a man named after the Hazard, with a surname that's a pirate ship, with the letter in the middle. Oda spent about 4 seconds on that name, and it does more work than most characters get in 100 chapters. Right, last thing. Blackbeard. Marshall D. Teach. There's the letter, plain as anything. And Rox D. Zebek has one too. And Blackbeard's introduction is on an island called Jaya, in a bar. And there's a chair. Blackbeard sits in a specific place. And there are these little details, and honestly, the amount of arithmetic the fandom has done on this man could have got us to the moon. The theory, in its most popular form, is that Blackbeard is Rox somehow. His son, his reincarnation, his continuation, his heir, depending on who's talking. And the maths is neat. 2 Diers, 2 men, whose entire philosophy is that the strongest should simply take what they want. One dead, and one very much not. The evidence is that they've both got a letter in their name. That's the evidence. That's it. That's the entire case, dressed up in about 15 years of forum posts. And I say that as someone who half believes it, because it fits so beautifully, and because, as we've established more than once tonight, fitting beautifully is exactly how you get had. God Valley's not on the map. Nobody's found it. Nobody's saying, this next bit's a wonder. There's no theme to it really. It's the odds and ends, the corners of the map, the things Oda put in and then left standing there. Let's start with the elephant. There's an elephant walking across the ocean. It's the size of a country. Not very large, I mean you cannot see the whole of it, from the ground in one go. It has legs like mountains, and it walks through the sea, and it's been walking for 1,000 years. And on its back there's a nation. There are people living up there. There's a city, and a forest and weather. Generations have been born and died on the back of this animal, and none of them have ever seen it stop. That's Zunesha. And when the crew finally talk to it and ask it why, the answer is the bit that stayed with me for years. It's being punished. It committed a crime a very long time ago, and it was told to walk, and so it walks. That's the sentence, not death, not imprisonment. Just keep going and don't stop forever. And when they ask what the crime was, it won't say. All that walking, and it still won't name the thing it did, which either means it's ashamed or it means it's not allowed, and I honestly don't know which of those is worse. The sentence was handed down before recorded history. It's still being served. Nobody's checked in. There's no appeal, no parole, no one left alive who was at the trial. There's just an animal doing what it was told out of habit or guilt or obedience long after everyone who told it to has turned to dust. That one gets under my ribs a bit. It's not scary, it's just very sad, in a way this series doesn't often go for directly. Right, next. The Lunarians. There was a race of people who lived up on the red line, above everyone, back when that meant something. They've got wings and dark skin and white hair, and a ring of fire on their backs. They could survive anything. Extreme heat, extreme cold, injuries that would kill anyone else. They were, apparently, treated as gods, and they're thought to be extinct. More or less, nearly wiped out. Hunted, presumably, because a race that can't be killed is a fascinating research problem if you're the sort of organisation that has research problems. And the one we meet, the survivor, the last of them, as far as anyone knows, is working as a henchman. He's on a payroll, the final member of a divine race, who cannot be burned or frozen or broken, is doing security work for a lunatic in a hat. There's a whole tragedy in that, and the series treats it as a Tuesday, which is, weirdly, the most effective way it could have done it. Now Kuma, and I want to do this gently because it's the heaviest thing in this video and I'm not going to milk it. For about a decade, Bartholomew Kuma was a joke, not a cruel joke, just a background thing. He's a huge bloke with a Bible and paw prints. His power's daft. He's got paw pads on his hands and he can slap things away. People are enormous distances now. And then years and years later, Oda sits down and tells you who he actually was, and it turns out that every single thing you found funny about him was a man being taken apart on purpose. I'm not going to walk through it, partly because you should read it, and partly because it's honestly not what I want to leave in your head at this hour, but the shape of it is, he was a king, and a good one, and a father, and he made a series of choices, each of which cost him something he could never get back, and he made every single one of them for someone else, and he kept making them right up until there wasn't enough of him left to make any more, and he stood in the background of arcs for 10 years, while we all laughed at the pause. Those are the chapters I can't reread. I've tried. I get about 4 pages in, and I put it down, and go and do something else. That's not a criticism, obviously. That's the opposite. Right. Vegapunk's broadcast. Vegapunk is the world's smartest man, and he spent his career working for the people we've been talking about all evening, and at a certain point he decides to say something to everybody at once, and the government tries to switch it off. That's the whole sequence, essentially. Not a battle, a broadcast, a man trying to speak, and an institution trying to find the off switch, and the entire world listening in on a signal that keeps not quite dying. And it's a properly good idea for a climax in a series about this specific government, because we've established what they actually do. They don't win arguments, they prevent them. Their entire 800-year run is a run of successful edits. And here's a thing they cannot edit, going out live, and all they can do is scramble. Which brings us neatly to the mother flame. And I'll keep this short because it's genuinely uncomfortable, and I don't want to sit in it. The mother flame is a power source, clean, effectively infinite, the sort of thing that would solve every energy problem a civilization has. And it's also a bomb. Same technology, same object. The thing that could light every home on the planet is the thing that could take a country off the map, and it depends entirely on which way round you point it and who's holding it. I don't need to explain why that lands. It's not subtle, and it's not meant to be. It's just slightly startling to find it here, in a story about a rubber lad who wants a hat. Now, since we're in the corners, there's one I have to mention, and it's mad, and it's real, and it's hidden in the least important place imaginable. There's a civilization on the moon, not in the main story, in a cover. The way this works, for a stretch of the series, Oda ran little wordless stories on the chapter title pages, a panel a week, no dialogue, following a character who'd been written out. They're a bonus. They're the sort of thing you'd flick past. And one of those cover stories follows Enel, the villain from the Sky Island, after he's beaten, and he goes to the moon. And on the moon, he finds ruins, a dead city, ancient, abandoned, with murals on the walls, and the murals show a race of winged people leaving the moon and coming down to Earth, because the moon ran out of resources. That's a whole thing. That's an origin story for at least one of the races we've talked about tonight, and possibly for the shape of the entire world, and it's in the corner of some title pages in a side story about a bloke with a drum. There are also robots up there, ancient ones. Enel wakes them up and starts a little empire, which is a lovely ending for him, honestly, and people spent years arguing about whether any of it counts. It's drawn by Oda, so it's canon by the usual rules. But it's in a cover story, so nobody in the main plot has ever mentioned it. And for the longest time, you could reasonably say it was just a laugh. Then bits of it started turning up in the actual story. Quietly, sideways. Details that only make sense if the moon thing happened. Which means the man hid a foundational piece of his cosmology in a bonus feature and let it sit there for a decade while everyone treated it as a gag. I don't think that's a mistake. I think that's the same trick as the skeleton in the drawer and the bloke standing still in the water. He is entirely comfortable putting the important thing somewhere you won't look and waiting. One last thing, and it's a lighter one, and it's a lovely example of a thing we've been circling all night. When Kuma scattered the crew, everyone decided he'd done it deliberately to make them stronger, and the evidence was good. Zoro landed on the island belonging to the greatest swordsman alive. Nami landed on an island where they study the weather. Every single one of them landed somewhere that was Conveniently, exactly the finishing school they needed. So obviously, it was intentional. Obviously. And that was speculation for years, with no confirmation whatsoever. It just landed so tidily that everybody skipped the part where you check. You could see the shape from a mile off, and the shape was right, more or less, eventually. But being right isn't the same as knowing, and there's a difference between those two things that this fandom has cheerfully ignored from the start. Anyway, the elephant's still walking. That's all I've got for this layer. Right. There is a man in a panda suit, hidden in the background of One Piece. He's called Pandaman. He's been there since almost the beginning. He is in crowd scenes. He is in the audience at tournaments. He is in the rubble after buildings collapse. He turns up in the films. He turned up in the credits of the Romance Dawn animation, helping rebuild a village for no reason. Nobody asked for this. There's no law. He's not a mystery. He's a bloke in a panda outfit that Oda drew for a completely different manga years earlier, and then apparently could not stop drawing. And at this point, he's had more screen time than most named characters. He's outlasted entire arcs worth of villains. He has no lines. I love him. I think he might be the healthiest thing in this entire iceberg. Now the SBS, which is where a lot of tonight's odder facts have come from, so it's worth explaining what it actually is. The SBS is a Q&A column. It runs between chapters in the collected volumes. Readers write in and Oda answers, and the tone is absolutely feral. People ask him whether characters smell nice. People ask him to draw the villains as toddlers. There's a running bit where he pretends the readers are annoying him, and it is also, simultaneously, canon. That's the bit that gets me. This is not a bonus feature. Real information lives in there. Akainu's devil fruit got its name in the SBS. The bits we mentioned earlier about the timeline being independent of ours, SBS. When someone asked whether there'd be romance in the series, Oda's answer was that they're in love with adventure. And that's essentially the last word on it. And it was delivered in a column that also contains jokes about noses. So one of the biggest stories on Earth has a load of its world building filed in what is functionally a fanzine letters page. And it's brilliant. It means the boundary between the story and the bloke telling it is deliberately porous. He's in the room with you. Right, Romance Dawn? We touched on the rubber tree earlier, but let's do the actual history because it's a good one. Before One Piece, there were two one-shots, both called Romance Dawn. The first came out in a summer special in August 1996. The second came out about 6 weeks later, in September, in the main magazine. Two goes at the same idea, a month and a half apart. Same name, different story. He was clearly working something out. And then the serialised first chapter, the actual beginning of the actual series, came out the following July, and it's also called Romance Dawn. Three things, same title, the man tried it twice, then did it for real, and used the name a third time. That's not a man who ran out of ideas. That's a man who decided that was what the thing was called and wasn't going to be talked out of it. Now, how he got there. Oda was sketching pirate ideas as a junior high student, actual notebooks in pencil as a kid. Then he left school and went into the industry the hard way, which is assistant work. You sit in someone else's studio and you draw their backgrounds and their crowd scenes, and you get paid essentially nothing and you learn. And one of the people he assisted was Nobuhiro Watsuki on Rurouni Kenshin, mid-90s. So he was drawing someone else's samurai while carrying a pirate manga around in his head. And then the break, which is one of the more brutal things I've read about this industry. A slot opened up, 50 pages, from scratch, in 2 weeks. That was the offer. 2 weeks to produce 45 finished pages of comic from nothing, and if you can't, no slot. He said yes immediately. I think about that a lot, actually. Not the talent bit, the talent's obvious. The bit where somebody offers you the thing you've wanted since you were 11, attached to a deadline that is basically an insult, and you don't negotiate. You just say yes and then don't sleep for a fortnight. Right, here's a fact that I find genuinely disorientating. The internal clock of One Piece does not match ours. Oda's said this outright. The story's timeline is independent of the real one, which is why Luffy's been 17 for a very long time, and then 19 after the skip, and that's where he stayed. And when people have actually sat down and totted up the days, counting night scenes, counting how long they spent in each place, counting the moon phases, which Oda does draw consistently, the entire first half of the series covers, at absolute most, about a year. Probably less. 1,000 odd chapters, nearly 30 years of a man's working life, roughly 1 year of story. There is something genuinely strange about that. He has spent longer drawing it than they've spent living it, by an order of magnitude. Every one of us who's been reading this thing has aged decades watching a crew have a fairly busy 12 months. I don't know what to do with that. It's just true. Right, my favourite one. Brook. In 1997, the first year before the series had proven anything, Oda did a sketch of the eventual crew. All the slots. And in it there's a musician. And the musician is an 88-year-old skeleton with an afro. He drew that and then said nothing about it for 10 years. And in the meantime, the fandom, knowing only that Luffy wanted a musician, decided the musician would be a young woman, possibly a mermaid, possibly arriving in a rowboat. This was a huge, confident, widely held expectation. People wrote a great deal about her, and then in 2007 the door opened, and it was an 88-year-old skeleton with an afro, and he'd been sat in a drawer for a decade. That's the thing that actually impresses me about Oda, not the plotting, the patience. He knew, and he waited 10 years, and he let everyone be wrong the entire time, and never said a word. Since we're behind the curtain anyway, we should probably talk about the dub. The first one. Because there's a version of One Piece that a whole generation in the West met first, and it's barely the same program. The early English dub took a manga about a lad who wants to be the freest person on the ocean and decided it was a Saturday morning cartoon for 8-year-olds, which meant a lot of changes. Sanji's cigarettes became a lollipop, which is my favourite one, because they've taken a chain-smoking cook and given him a sweet and left everything else about him identical. He's still Sanji. He's just got a lolly. Guns became water pistols, sometimes hastily. Actual firearms, digitally converted into things that squirt. Characters didn't die, they got sent away. There's an entire death in the early series, a properly important one, the one that gives a main character his whole reason for being, and it was rewritten so the person didn't die, they were just badly hurt. And that specific change had a knock-on effect that ended up in the theory graveyard, funnily enough. Because for years there was a fan idea that a certain Marine officer was secretly that character, survived and grown up. And a big chunk of why that idea had legs in the West is that a load of people had watched a version where she didn't die. The theory was partly a dubbing artifact. People were building on a foundation that only existed in one language. There's also a rap. There's an opening theme that's a rap. It's about pirates. And I want to be careful here, because it's easy to just point and laugh. And the people who made that dub were working under commercial instructions that came from a long way above them. Somebody in an office decided what this was, and everyone downstream did their job. But it's genuinely one of the odder things that's ever happened to a piece of fiction. A story whose entire thesis is that authority sands the edges off things in order to make them acceptable. Got its edges sanded off in order to be acceptable. Nobody planned that irony. It just happened. Right, where the pen actually is as of me sitting here. The series is in its final saga, which sounds like it means the end is next week and does not. The final saga is several arcs long. Currently everyone's on Elbaf, the island of giants, which has been coming since roughly forever, and it's been running since late 2024, and it's still going. Oda's said publicly that he means to close it out in 2026 and move on, and he said where to, the island only the Pirate King has ever set foot on, which is not a cliffhanger, and I'm not presenting it as one. It's just where he is. He's still at the desk. He's been at that desk since the start, and he's currently drawing giants. He's still drawing it, that's all. Right, bottom layer. And I'll be honest with you about what this one is because it isn't what these usually are. There's no cursed thing down here. Nothing's going to be revealed. The bottom of this iceberg is the compost heap. Because I've come round to thinking that the most interesting layer of any fandom this old isn't what turned out to be true. It's the enormous, slowly rotting pile of things everybody was absolutely certain about and got completely wrong. Decades of very smart people, reading very carefully, arriving confidently at the wrong answer. That's a document. Nobody's keeping it, but it's a document. So let's go through some. Slowly, no order, no ranking, just a wander through the graveyard. Start with the big one, because it's the one you'll have heard even if you've never read a page of this series. Oda was rumoured to have told a dying child the ending. You know this one. It's a Make-A-Wish story. There was a kid who was terminally ill, and he was a huge fan, and his wish was to know how One Piece ends. And Oda, because Oda is by all accounts a genuinely kind man, sat down with him and told him. And the kid died knowing the ending, and it's the only time it's ever been told to anyone. It's not true. It never happened. It's been circulating for well over a decade. It gets reposted constantly. It turns up in comment sections under videos exactly like this one. And it is a complete fabrication. There's no kid. There's no wish. There's no record of it anywhere, except in the retelling. And I find it fascinating rather than annoying, because look at what that story's doing. It's not a theory about the plot, it's a theory about the author. It exists because people wanted a specific thing to be true about Oda. That he's kind, that he knows the ending, that the ending is a real fixed object somewhere, and not just a plan that might change. The story does 3 jobs at once, and none of them are about pirates. That's why it won't die. It's too useful. Next, Kaku's Devil Fruit. Kaku is a CP9 agent, and for a good while, nobody knew what his power was. And then he's handed a devil fruit, and it's shaped like a banana, and Frankie calls him a monkey because he jumps about the place. Banana. Monkey. Everyone was sure. It's a giraffe. The Ushi Ushi no Mi model giraffe. He turns into a giraffe. And I want to be clear, everyone had a lovely time being wrong about this. And Oda was obviously winding people up on purpose. The banana shape, the monkey nickname, all of it was set up for the reveal that this bloke turns into a giraffe and then has to fight the best swordsman in the crew while being a giraffe. Blackbeard scarred Shanks, giving him those claw marks over his left eye. Big one this. The 3 claw marks over Shanks's eye. And there's a moment early on where Buggy hits Luffy in the face with knives between his fingers. And the marks match, and Buggy and Shanks used to be crewmates, and they hate each other now. It's all there. It genuinely all lines up. Shanks says it was Blackbeard, says it out loud in a chapter plainly. No ambiguity. Sabo is Trafalgar Law. This was popular. This was properly popular on forums for a good stretch. And it's a bit of a daft theory. While the age works, Law actually shows up as a mysterious young man long before Sabo is even introduced or believed dead, with his tragic backstory only revealed much later. It's undone by something very small, which is that Law does not react to Ace at all. Ace gets captured, Ace gets executed, and Law is present for some of this, and it does nothing to him, which, if you were Sabo, it would do something to you. The rest of it fell apart properly when Oda drew Law as a child in an SBS and drew adult Sabo on a chapter cover, and they're just different blokes. Crocodile used to be a woman. Still going. This one's still going. The origin is that Ivankov, who can change people's sex, knows a secret about Crocodile's past that nobody else knows and uses it to blackmail him into behaving. And that's genuinely in the text. That's a real thing that happens. So the fandom did the obvious sum, and it's never been resolved. Oda drew the warlords as children once, and Crocodile appears to be drawn as a boy. But the counter-argument is immediately that he could be a girl drawn as a tomboy. And off we go again. That's why this one won't die. It's got just enough evidence to stay alive and not enough to settle. That's the perfect conditions for a fandom theory. An unresolved detail that Oda deliberately planted and has deliberately never picked back up. He's had 20-odd years to clear it up. He's chosen not to. He knows exactly what he's doing. Ace is the One Piece. Oh, this one's rough. The logic was, Ace is Roger's son. Roger said he left everything in that place. Therefore, the treasure is his kid. And it's a nice idea thematically. Very nice. The treasure is a person. Love conquers all. The greatest thing the Pirate King left behind was a boy. 2 problems. 1, Roger left Ace on Batarilla, which is not that place. 2, and this is the horrible bit, the theory is disproved by Whitebeard. Because Ace dies, and Whitebeard, dying himself, standing in the wreckage of everything, uses some of his last words to confirm to the entire world that the One Piece is real. It exists. Gol D. Roger urges people to find the One Piece. So the theory doesn't just get disproved, it gets disproved by a man's dying declaration, immediately after the theory's subject has died in front of him. That's a rough way for a theory to go. The Shichibukai are the 7 deadly sins. Extremely old, this one, and you can nearly make it work. Hancock's lust, Moria's sloth, the man does nothing but sleep. Doflamingo's pride, which is barely even a stretch, Crocodile's greed, Jinbei, Blackbeard. You can find something for most of them. And then you get to envy, and the whole thing falls over, because nobody's envy. And then Law becomes one, and Buggy becomes one, and there are more than 7 people who've held the job over time, and the maths just quietly stops working. It refuses to die anyway, because 6 out of 7 is such a cruel place for a pattern to stop. Right, my favourite, my absolute favourite. This is why we're down here. Kaku is a Kainu. February 2006. Someone on a forum. And the reasoning is as follows. They both wear their caps pulled down. That's it. That's the theory. 2 characters wear hats in a similar fashion. Therefore, they are the same person. Kaku's blonde. A Kainu's got black hair. Kaku's a spy. A Kainu's an admiral. Kaku would have been about 3 years old at the point in history where a Kainu was already an adult doing admiral things. Kaku turns into a giraffe, as we've covered. A Kainu turns into magma. None of that mattered for a bit. 2 blokes, 2 hats, 1 theory. I think about that person sometimes. 20 years ago now. They noticed a hat and they went for it. And they typed it out and they posted it. And it's still there, and I hope they're well. A few quick ones to finish. The Yonko match the 4 sacred beasts. Red bird, blue dragon, white tiger, black tortoise, and Shanks is red, and Whitebeard is white, so obviously the other 2 would be blue and black. Neither of them was, and then Blackbeard took the title after Whitebeard died, which makes 5 emperors across the timeline, and 4 beasts, and now the maths is worse than it was at the start. Usopp's nose is a crosshair. That's why he never misses. He's just got a long nose. It's genetic, it's from his mum, and it's a Pinocchio joke because he's a liar. He also misses fairly regularly, which rather undercuts the whole thing. And the nose isn't attached to the slingshot, so as an aiming device it would be useless. Which, I mean, someone worked that out. And I'm grateful. And the last one, which isn't really a theory so much as a habit, every shadowy figure is somebody we've already met. Oda does this thing where a new character appears in silhouette or masked, and the fandom immediately decides it must be someone from 300 chapters ago making a comeback every time, without fail, and it's almost never true. Kizaru turned up as half a face, and everyone decided he was Spandine, a bloke from a flashback, for 4 straight chapters. He wasn't. He was a new man. He's always a new man. Right, and there's a thread through all of these, and I'll say it once and gently, because I don't want it to sound like a lecture at this hour. The failure mode isn't stupidity. Not one of the people who believed these things was thick. Some of them were reading more carefully than I ever have. The failure mode is tidiness. Every single one of these theories is an act of housekeeping. There's a loose end, an unexplained scar, an unnamed fruit, a hat pulled down, an initial in a name, and a loose end is uncomfortable. So you reach for the answer that ties it off. And the tidier the answer, the more it feels like a discovery, because a good story is tidy, and you know you're reading a good story. So tidy must mean right. But a story that's still being written has loose ends that aren't loose ends yet. They're just threads. Some of them are going somewhere, and some of them are a bloke drawing a panda for a laugh, and there is genuinely no way to tell from the inside. And I've believed several of these, by the way. I'm not standing above the graveyard pointing. I was properly convinced by the half a circle thing for years. I told people about it. I'd tell people about it now if you let me. They were all wrong, and the guessing was still worth it. So that's the 12. And here's the daft thing about doing an iceberg for a story that isn't finished. Yeah, okay. The bottom keeps moving. I could sit here and record this again in 3 years and half of the graveyard would have graduated into fact. And half the facts would have picked up a footnote. And there'd be a whole new layer underneath that doesn't exist tonight because the man hasn't drawn it yet. That blank stretch of map I mentioned at the start, it's still blank. It'll be blank for a while yet. If I did another one of these, I'd want to go back and do Water 7 properly. Not the weapon, the town, the canals, the oxen, the shipwrights, the fact that the most dangerous document on the planet spent decades in a working boatyard because somebody made a promise to somebody else, and neither of them was important. There's a whole video in that, and nobody's made it, as far as I know. Anyway, there's an elephant out there walking. There's a chair nobody's meant to sit in. There's a stack of black rocks in gardens all over the world that nobody's ever bothered to read. And somewhere in a room tonight, a man in his 50s is drawing giants. Sleep well.